No, the one guy came in yesterday in the middle of it and was like right at the part where I'm explaining all this philosophical stuff. I was like, he probably has no idea what the heck I'm talking about. Yeah, because I already described the whole project and so I'm kind of, it's better for people to just be here.
Yeah. Right. No, totally.
Do you usually wake up this time?
Oh yeah. I'm usually up at this time. Yeah, I am usually up at this time, and I'm usually much more like
with it.
Yeah, but I like I said, with my mom and everything, I've been running around like crazy. So it's been a little nuts, but yeah, no, actually, because usually I have a problem, in the business, I've got problems starting at this time in the morning,
I mean, yeah, you have an early business, man.
Yeah, so I'm generally up and about. Yeah, I'm generally.
What time do you usually wake up?
I wake up at 6 o'clock.
Oh, okay, that's not bad.
5:30, 6. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you don't have to be here when the store opens.
No. They take care of the store stuff, but generally, it's like something's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you had a few people yesterday.
Yeah. I had more people online, really, and I think, like I said last time, I think I'm just going to do this online next time, and that way, all the food, it's just, I think people are just more accustomed to doing stuff online now, and then plus it's just like, it's content. And then I just went home and edited the film, and then I could, I had it on, YouTube makes it really easy. And then I had, a nice block, and I just sent it out to people who couldn't be there. So it was really helpful. Yeah. But it's interesting doing it 3 times because every time is coming up differently.
It's gonna. I bet. Yeah, probably your final one will probably be your best one.
I don't know. Yesterday was pretty. It had its pitfalls, right? So on one side, when someone came in, it kind of threw me off, and there was this little lapse in the middle that I was stammering and trying to figure out what to say. But it was pretty good yesterday. The second one that I did, I got pretty poetic. After you talk for a while, you get comfortable.
Now, I see you got that. Is that your brand? Is that
no? This is Tazio. This is the place out in LA that I get everything from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is a linen jacket. It's still really hot.
Yeah. So what is it, a line around it? Well, paint on it.
It's really And I have a you saw me. I was wearing a seersucker yesterday.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Just jackets in New Orleans, man. It's difficult fashion thing to pull off after.
You gotta really have the kicker with the linen or even seersucker, and that is that companies that are around here and that make those, you gotta have 100% linen or 100% cotton,
right?
And then the lining. If you've got a lining, if you got a polyester lining, well, that's negating the whole.
You can feel that, you get, and a lot of them.
I don't know if that one is polyester or what that lining is.
Yeah, it probably is. It's a poly blend.
Yeah.
But yeah, that takes
the cool part.
You're right.
Yeah,
because usually I've seen stuff where it's linen and it's just there's no lining at all. And I can feel how it's bringing in the heat. But I think really good suits probably don't have that lining. He said he was just waking up.
Yeah, that's totally cool.
I lost my people from online.
Oh, because they're.
Well, I put it's supposed to start at 8:08.
8:08.
Yeah. So. Hey, there he is. All right. How you doing, man? It's been a while. This is Harry. This is Harry. To the coffee place.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's see if anyone joined us. We lost our 2 people from online, so hopefully they'll rejoin us. Hope yourself. I have, if you need anything to eat, I have some bananas. I didn't really plan for anything for breakfast this time.
Breakfast either. It's good.
Let me close it and we'll get started.
Is it better?
Do what?
Did you? What your name is?
Kevin.
Kevin. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I heard the first time. I thought you said Beto.
Oh, Pedo. Kevin Pedo.
Beto, Kevin. Okay, got it.
Was that how you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, yeah. People pronounce it different ways, but yeah.
Yeah.
What are you saying?
I've never said your name
Oh.
out loud, so. But I've always been wondering,
Yeah, Pedo. Like Pedo, sort of Pedo.
It's got that.
It's really, I mean, technically, the real pronunciation is probably Pedo.
Really?
Like the Canadian French, pronunciation.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing is that
Instead of P-E-D, it's P-E-D-E-A-U-X, but you pronounce that Pedo. Yeah, but I don't go with all Pedo. Pronounce it with an E.
my sister's trying to get on. That must be her. All right. Let me make sure that's her, and we can start. Yeah, you can leaf through all that. That's kind of what I want to talk about.
Any of the MKP guys show up last night?
No.
I had notes from several of them saying things had come up.
Yeah, actually, that happened to a lot of people yesterday. It was like, and it's interesting doing it so many different times, because that's the.
Early in the morning, you don't have time for something to pop up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was my aunt told me that she did big time fundraising for like Bill Gates and stuff like that, and she used to say that this was like a prime time to do fundraising because people could do before they went to the job. But it's like she was like living in Seattle or New York. It's like it's not New Orleans where it's it's a little more. I don't know if people are really getting up and doing the thing. So it looks like my sister has joined. Oh, she lost me. Wait, did she lose me again? She keeps getting on and off. All right, I'll start. She'll figure it out. She is a tech whiz at home. So all right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and so I'm going to be talking about this project that I have. That I've been thinking about for the last 6 months, really, and really probably a year, about the Epic of Desmond James, and really, I won't describe the project, but I thought that as I started describing it, I got more and more into the philosophy behind it, and that's my background. So obviously, I kept plunging deeper and deeper into the philosophy until I came out the other end with new ideas about art and where art is going in the 21st century. That's sort of where this all led. So I'm glad I'm amongst friends, so I can kind of just share these things, and I'll talk about the whole project at the end and everything like that, and I'll try to get you out of here by 9:00. And so basically what we're starting with is just a quick summary. Okay, so this is basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be the court artist for a system-involved young man in New Orleans. And over the year residency, use mentorship and education as a means to sort of let him see himself in a different light. Let him contemplate his past, his present, and his future, and then paint pictures of him, large king-size paintings that are 10 by 13 feet, and then sell those portraits for hopefully the goal is $20,000 for his college fund. And when I say system involved, I mean specifically, a youth that has been arrested, who's gone through juvenile detention, and that's why I'm going to be working with a nonprofit specifically to get someone like that, and I can work hands-on for a year. And so, I've been working with youth for 24 years. Ever since I was 16, I've worked with kids from the suburbs, inner city. I've worked in all demographics, in different jobs of being a coach, teacher, mentor. And so one of the things that I have 3 things that I've sort of seen what youth need as far as dealing with the temptations of the street life. And that's what when we think about education, that's almost what we have to think about in New Orleans, because it's so early on, 9, 10, 11. I was, coaching a kid who was 11 years old, and he was a gang leader, and he was a sweet kid, but he was a gang leader. I mean, it was absolutely astonishing what these kids have to deal with so early on. So one of the things that I've heard over and over again, and I think that my old church said it best, is without vision, the people perish. Okay, and so there's a necessity for these youth to have a vision of their future. Some type of goal or dream that they're working towards that will help them deal with the temptations of the short-sightedness, that's surrounding them in the street life. And so when I came up with this project, I thought, okay, yeah, obviously I'm going to be helping this young man think about his vision, but I want something that points beyond art, that after this project is done and once, the residency is gone and the paintings, have been brought down, there's something there that is pulling him towards his future, towards being something that he didn't previously see himself as. And so that's the idea of the college scholarship, having a college fund. It redefines who he is now. Now at 18, that volatile age that we just saw 2 mass shootings, they were both 18 years old, because we all know intuitively that it's a very hard time where you're trying to figure your life out. You're a man, you're a boy, and it's very hard for young men to figure out where they want to go. And now he knows at that volatile age of 18 that he's going off to college, and that he's education is imperative in his life. And so that was sort of the thinking behind having this as the end goal of the project. The other part is, and I don't think we do this as well, we think about the idea of a vision very well in New Orleans and with youth, but we sometimes fail to think that these kids need a mediator towards that vision. We think that sometimes you construct the vision and then it's up to them, right? Well, yes and no, right? There is obviously personal responsibility, but what I find is that in having that mentor, having that guide, these kids are able to discuss the pitfalls, discuss the things that come up, and flash out their vision a little better than if it's just something that is far away 6 years from now. If they have someone kind of keeping them in the integrity of that vision, or expanding that vision, it's very helpful for the youth. And so that's the idea that I came up with, was a curriculum called the Education of Eidos. And eidos is actually the Greek word for idea. And we'll talk about that later on with Plato's cave, myth of the cave. And so this Education of Eidos is really constructed around a lot of the liberal arts, right? Reading, writing, discussion, meditation, and creation. And it's basically what's happening is throughout the year residency, I'm going to be having this kid and have sort of hour-long classes. Maybe it's half hour, maybe it's hour, just depending on the situation. And each class is going to put him in touch with the higher spiritual aspects of his character. Really what I'm talking about is an aesthetic education. So that it's a curriculum that will focus on the youth experiencing the possibility of greatness and beauty through aesthetic experiences. And really, any good education starts with self-knowledge, right? That's the basis of the best education. And so these portions are really a path towards self-examination, such that we put these higher expectations upon him. Some of this work that this Chalzon do is some of the hardest work that he will ever do. And it's some of the work that a lot of very brave men shy away from, because it's that work on the inner self, a work on, where you are in your life. So the soul reveals itself in its higher aspirations, right? And the defects of the soul, the shortcomings of one's, personality or life is revealed itself against also the background of those higher aspirations. So we build up those peaks, right? And we let them use that as their standard for judgment about their life. And it sounds harsh, but at the same time, it allows that kid to go up against something that is great and be involved in something that's bigger than themselves. And I think that kids very, very much love that. They love that challenge. And sometimes our education system does not bring that challenge. And so, really, the third part that I've seen with kids in dealing with the streets is that they fail to see the significance of their life, right? And every time there's a shooting, if you read the comments, which I always do, I don't know why I do, but I've been doing it for 15 years, and they haven't changed very much. So I'll read them for you because they don't change much. But one of the ones that you always hear is that, these kids don't respect life, respect their own life, so they can't respect others, right? And I think there's a grain of truth to that, right? But how do you teach a kid how to respect life or create significance in their life? That's something that is, I think, an age-old question, right? It's really about how do you create that education, the ideal education? And so obviously it's done through love, it's done through time and mentorship, but it's also, in my eyes, it's done through art. And that's sort of the basis from my art from the beginning. Is I started drawing kids on that baseball team to show them the significance of their life, and to show that I took an hour or two to look at their face, look at their soul, and copy it for them. And they responded splendidly. They always do. They're always amazed. No matter how off my art is, they very much appreciate it, because art to me is just concrete love. It's time put into a physical manifestation, and it's love. And so they feel that. And so the idea is that at the end of this presentation, at the end of the year, I will hopefully be in New Orleans Museum of Art. That's my dream vision. So maybe I'll just speak into existence now. And it's, we'll have 6 to 8 portraits of this young man, in his history. And it will be this awesome display of, these king-size paintings. And what I've done is, since I started drawing, I also started making these, clothing. And so my dream has always been to combine both the abstract expressionism and the color and the movement of this work with the realism of those drawings. And it's taken me about 15 years to finally start doing that type of thing. But it's always been my vision, because I want to present something otherworldly to this child that he doesn't see himself in that vision very, ever, to see yourself in that kingly state, like someone, an important agent of world history, and with color and movement and passion all around them. I think it's an awesome display, and I think that in itself is worth the value of this entire project. Is for our kid to see that about their life, so they can start taking their life seriously. And that's really what this whole sort of education is about, them taking their lives seriously. And so, ever since I moved down to New Orleans, it's taken me a while to figure out that really what I'm thinking about in philosophic terms is, what is the good life, right? That's sort of the question of philosophy. What is the good life? And whenever we talk to a kid who, has started down that violent path of, having a gun, having a couple priors, in a gang, out of school, these sorts of things that are very high risk, we start when we intervene on them, or when we talk to them, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to convince him that the violent life is not worth living, right? That is a dead end, and that there's another higher life, a possibility for his future, that he is filled with potential. We don't quite know what that potential is, but we're building up and trying to convince him and persuade him that life is worth living, right? And so we have to, in a way, be poets of the good life. And in our example, we often are. If we do it really well for mentors at the highest degree, we are poets of the good life in every action that we perform in front of them. And so, really what this comes back to is this project is sort of investigating the idea of the tyrannical, violent life versus the philosophic life, which is sort of the theme of Plato's book, The Republic. And so, as I kind of examine this question of what is the good life, through my time being a community organizer, and during this time of thinking about the project, I started examining, okay, well, what is art? What is the artist's role in society? And having that background in community organizing, I've always thought of art a little differently, right? Like, when you hear gunshots or go to 100 funerals, art that is speaking merely to an abstraction does not cut it, to placate the needs of the moment. And I feel like something has shifted maybe over the last 10 years or so, 15 years of where art is and where it's going. I feel like right now, the art that is out in the art world isn't addressing the needs of the moment, right? It's not answering the problems that we're facing. And I very much sense that is happening, and then it's fundamentally changed, right? You start, as an artist, you have to pick up those little small movements of the soul, of the people around you. And that's what it feels like, is that art needs a change, and it has started to fundamentally change the role of the artist, what is art, and those sorts of big questions. And so, very briefly, what I see is that artists' new role is to give shape to human powers and to facilitate an ideal into the real. And what I really see in a big scheme of things is that the artist is now a midwife of an ideal. And so this is sort of what I'm going to be talking about, a little more aesthetic idealism, which is what I see with some of the artists that I'm going to talk about, Kehinde Wiley, and that I'm going to try to flesh out throughout this project. I now just started thinking about these things, and I can't wait to start this project so that, I can further investigate these ideas. And so I'm going to talk about two artists real quick, Paul Rubens and Kehinde Wiley. And Rubens, over the pandemic, like everyone, I had to be at home all day. And I got into this habit of going at like 8 o'clock, I started winding down, and I picked a book from the shelf that I bought over the course of the years, at these book sales. And I just started reading a lot more about art history. I started looking at the pictures, Seinfeld or Frasier would be in the background. I'd just be looking at, Rubens and really investigating these masters. And I fell in love with them again, during the pandemic, because it was just a nightly ritual. And so I really loved Rubens, and some of the things he did were, just astounding, at the height of his powers. I think with him, he came into fame pretty early on. Obviously, he was talented beyond belief, but he, at the height of his powers, he was actually asked to be a court artist for the Queen of France. And by his account, she lived a very boring life. Like, the king at that time was out and about. He hadn't been home in years. In fact, he wasn't even present at his marriage. He actually had a stand-in for his marriage. And Paul Rubens actually documented this. It was the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never even seen something like that. So she was at home, but the affairs of the state, the great politics of the day, were happening elsewhere. And so he was kind of put in charge of watching this woman and documenting her every move and, trying to find some way to create epic airs about her, put her in the context of the world history, make her an important agent. And it was just very difficult. So he used that imagination and myth and philosophy that he had grown accustomed to in his previous paintings. And he kind of instilled her world. He embellished her world, and her world was kind of led to this enchantment that on the plain eye you would not see. But it came over the time of, I think it was about 3 or 4 years of that residency where he was really with her, watching her in her daily moves. And the end result was what you'll see here is an entire room filled in the Louvre, which used to be the palace. And all these things are about 13 feet by 10 feet, gigantic, and it fills the entire room. And each one, this is the best painting of that century. Just absolutely phenomenal stuff. If not probably the top 5 portraits that I've seen, in world history. And it fills up the entire room, and it just this air of importance happens as soon as you enter, right? And so what I gathered from this as this 21st century man is like, what happened to the court artist? Whatever happened to that aspect of art? Now we have these residencies and they're like 6 weeks and then you're gone, And so I love this idea of being a court artist because I've always found immersion being the best way to display the art, to get involved with the people you want to paint and get involved in their daily life. Just being a drive-by tourist, taking pictures of, New Orleanians and then go publishing them. You can tell when that happens because it's very artificial about what they feel in the soul of those people. And so I want to, always immerse myself within the community because I know, having, had a career about 15 years, that leads to the soul coming out in the paintings, in the drawings, in the portraits. And so the second artist that I found inspiration with this idea of aesthetic idealism is a current artist called Kehinde Wiley, and he's very well known now for the Barack Obama portrait, the presidential portrait that's on tour. If it's coming to your city, go see it. He's a phenomenal painter. And I actually had this great encounter with Wiley's work. Is that in 2010 I had been a community organizer for a couple of years, and I've been in the living rooms of mothers who lost their sons to violence, heard the stories of the young men, read hundreds of papers, newspaper articles about, the lives of those young men. And then I went to attend hundreds of funerals of those same young men who were lost to the street. And when I came to this magazine that was in the bookstore, I saw Wiley, and it was this colorful, expressive, gorgeous paintings of these young Black men in, current fashion, posed very much like they were taking out of a Rubens era, right? Baroque era. It didn't seem like they were of today, right? But they were of today, and so that always that was even before I started drawing or doing any art, and I just was absolutely left awestruck. I thought, here I am dealing with this reality of these kids dying, and the only way those things are portrayed is through mass media, and it's a very short paragraph of such and such, age 29, died at the corner of such and such. He has 8 priors, da 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 da, and that's it. That's his entire life in black and white, and maybe a mugshot. And there's no dignity in that. There is no beauty. There's no soul in that. And so when you see Wiley dealing with those same type of men, you can't help but feel like, that you're in the midst of something significant, of something otherworldly and beautiful. And so his process is extremely interesting. Obviously, his final product is absolutely gorgeous, but I found his process to be even more interesting. And it's come at the sort of a big part of this idea of aesthetic idealism is that what he does is he starts out, he actually started out in New York, and he goes outside of his studio, he looks around on the streets of Brooklyn, and he starts eyeing the crowd and sees someone who has a little swagger, a young man who has swagger, right? He's dressed in something flashy, he has a certain swagger about him. And he actually goes up and approaches those young men, and he tries to persuade them to come to his art studio upstairs. And so it takes some convincing in this odd scenario, and he brings them up to the studio, and what he has is all these art books laid out on the table. And he said, okay, you look at these paintings, and all the paintings are from like 16th, 17th, 18th century, guys like Rubens, of kings and queens and aristocracy. And he says, go choose something that you feel speaks to your character, right? Speaks to you. And so this young man is just pulled off the street, and all of a sudden he's encountering all of, art history. And maybe he's never been to a museum. Maybe he's never looked at fine art in that way. And I can only imagine how odd that whole process could be. It's otherworldly. And so, as he investigates, he's thinking about himself in the place of these men, these European, wealthy aristocrats, power players in world history. And when he finally selects one, he selects one that he feels is his personal expression, his expression of himself, even now, 400 or 500 years later, as a man in the 21st century. And what happens is Wiley takes that pose, and he, puts the man again, does a photo shoot where that young man is doing the pose of the painting, in the art books. And what you have is something that is, very different. It's this completely, they're in this new world of royalty. They're in this aristocratic airs. That's what is involved in the final product. And so, a lesser artist would take a picture of this young man, maybe standing against the building, smoking a cigarette, and then paint that up and say, this is him. Well, Wiley takes the experience of an aesthetic experience through looking at the books as sort of education, and then through that education has this final product where you're seeing this young man as you would never think about him, in a different nature. You're seeing a nature is being revealed that you would never have thought if you would have just passed by with certain ideas of who that young man is. And so, what Wiley does is he's crafting content in a deliberate and thoughtful way. He gets to choose those books. He's choosing what books goes out there. As you can tell, he's not putting, modern art out there. He's not even putting African art, right? He's putting old European masters out there, which is very odd. And he's able to, through that, give shape to human powers. And so by subjecting his model to an aesthetic experience, he can reveal the model in a higher realm of existence. Like I said, into that world of kings and queens that only oil paint, the only people who did oil paint during that time are the wealthy. And they paid these masters so that they could put oil on canvas in large displays, put them in gold frames, and put them in institutions. And that was, to Wiley, that was propaganda, right? That was a show of power. And that's how kings and queens sort of showed their majesty, was through the arts. And so basically when I think about Wiley, I really try to think about the overall. What is he doing here? I try to dwell on the method that he's doing within art. Okay, it's hard sometimes to separate social issues from artistic issues. Let's just deal with the artistic issue and how he's creating these beautiful paintings. He's taking this mass culture perception of these young men. And he actually began with just black and white paintings, black and white pictures that he saw. He saw a mug's photo on the ground. He picked it up and he actually painted that mug photo of this young black man. And that's how he started. He started thinking about how the media portrays young black men. And that's very much in line with what I saw over 15 years of studying media and even the community, how they approach depicting these young men who die on the streets. And so he's taking a mass cultural perception and he's interrupting it through aesthetic experience, right? He's allowing this young man to come off the street. He has certain opinions about himself, and those are interrupted by this aesthetic experience. And such that now this young man is thrown into this realm of the ideal, right? Into the realm of the kings and the queens. And so when really I started thinking about, okay, well, this is very interesting. This is very new. Usually painters, like I said, they go take a picture or they take a model, they paint them, maybe they adjust them. They don't go through this whole process of kind of changing the soul of the man, then, putting him back into the photo. It's this odd, rhythm of nature, art, nature, if that makes sense, like a second nature. And so I started thinking about, let's take this aesthetic experience and let's exaggerate it. Okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, if we exaggerate it, it's going to be a series of aesthetic experiences. Okay, well, what if instead of just looking at an art book for 1 hour or 2 hours prior to the modeling, he looks at the next week, right? And then the next week they go to a museum. And then the next week they actually try to copy and paint these models. What if we exaggerate this whole aesthetic experience over a month, a year, until we're really talking about education. We're really talking about an aesthetic education. And so with this idea, what Wiley brought in, I say he's the beginning of what I call the aesthetic idealism. And really at the center of aesthetic idealism, which my project is also about, is the question of education. So it's interesting how now art has kind of gone full circle, because now it is about social change in a way, right? Whenever we read those comments in Times-Picayune about the shootings, everyone says it starts with education. It starts with education, right? We hear that over and over again. My question is, okay, what does that education look like? What is the education that you're talking about? Is it just training? Are we trying to spur, change in his life? What does that look like? So really, now that art is about education through this aesthetic idealism, we have to ask ourselves, what is the ideal education such that we can bring that model, that youth, that young black man to the heights of beauty with a capital B, right? That's now the role of an artist, is to, create a curriculum, create content such that that young man can reach those heights of beauty and the ideal. And so I've had a very interesting education. Let me change here. I have a very interesting background in education. When I was 18, I was suspended several times in school, and I was about as close to being expelled as you possibly could get. I was on the verge. Everyone just joked how I was like literally hanging by a thread my senior year. And I came out of that experience of being expelled and suspended as being humiliated, being just oppressed, feeling like I didn't know who I was, because I didn't think I was the same person who was doing these acts. I didn't think I was the same person who the community thought I was. I knew that there was a nature within me that was different than how people were perceiving me, or even how I was perceiving myself. And so I had this just sadness about me, this hole within me, trying to find meaning within my life, because everything that I had previously known did not work. I was on the verge of expulsion. I was on the verge of jail. Those things just were not the way to go. And so I was lucky enough to go to St. John's College, which is in Annapolis, Maryland, and it's called the Great Books Program. And the Great Books Program is, in essence, the brand names, the big names of philosophy, literature, poetry, science, and mathematics. And Aristotle, Plato, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, the Bible. We read all of it, all throughout human history, the greatest thoughts ever, thought. And I went into that experience feeling like I didn't know what my life was, right? And I went in diving into this philosophy, diving into this literature and poetry, just trying to find myself, trying to find a reason, trying to find wisdom to elevate myself above this pain, try to find some poetry above that pain. And so I encountered all these men and women throughout the program with that thirst for knowledge, with that thirst for self-knowledge. And one of the people who I came encounter with was Plato, who talks about Socrates, the life of Socrates. And I think it's hard for anyone not to fall in love with Socrates, especially as a young man, because I always imagined when I was reading it, it felt like Seinfeld in a way, like a Seinfeld of philosophy. It was this like crazy drama and comedy and, weird sexual things were going on and people were drinking. And it was unlike anything you'd read in philosophy, prior, or afterwards, and Socrates is just a hoot, he's just hilarious. And so I fell in love with Plato, and one of his key books is The Republic, which is basically his theory of education, right? The entire thing is about the education of the philosopher. And so he's talking about the ideal education, right? Let's forget everything that's out there. Let's construct an education for a philosopher king who will be, the ruler and great poet, philosopher king, for the state. And so, he gives an example of what I see as being the greatest philosophy education. So as we're kind of looking at this, Kehinde Wiley started looking at the aesthetic experiences that led us to aesthetic education, led us to what is the ideal education, and it's leading us now into thinking about Plato's cave. And so I will describe it very briefly because it's one of those images, once you see it, it's hard to get out of your head and you start weighing everything as far as shadows and light. That's all you see. So Plato, constructs this picture of humanity up here. They're chained down, staring at the shadows on the wall of the cave. You can see these guys, and they're pointing, and they have all they can see is themselves and the shadows, and they can't see behind them because there's a giant wall. And behind the wall are these statues that are, these men holding and bringing through, and that's creating the shadows on the wall from this fire in the back, right? Very odd image, right? So the story goes that one day a teacher comes along and compels one of the prisoners over here to look behind him. And so when the prisoner looks behind him, he sees there's a wall. He sees that, look, these are just shadows. There's a fire. It's all a farce. It's all set up, it's all fake. And so what happens is that prisoner then breaks his chains, and he's convinced and persuaded by the teacher to go ascend out of the cave. And when I imagine this, I always imagine all these rocks and just being a very long, it's not this short, it's a very long rocky road up towards the dim light that you're seeing outside the cave. And he finally gets outside the cave here, and he's blinded by the light. He sees things now as they truly are. He sees the trees as they are. He sees the water, the rocks, all these things that he only saw shadows of. He now saw the reality. He saw the truth. He saw the things in themselves. And so really what he sees and he goes into is the world of ideas, the world of eidos, right? That's what Plato talks about as this is absolute beauty, absolute truth, absolute justice. And so then the prisoner goes back down, having experienced this wild experience of light and truth. And now his existence, he goes back down in the cave, and I've always wondered why that is. And there's a lot of philosophical thought in that, but I think in some way he craves the shadows. He craves being around the other prisoners. He can't be at it alone. He can't just stare at the abstractions in a way. He craves company. And so he has this odd experience, though, that he is still with the prisoners and he's kind of looking at what they're seeing. He knows it's a farce, but he has to kind of talk about these things and act like they're enjoyable. At the same time, he has the memory or one eye towards this ideal, the ideas, the things as they are. He knows that that is our true reality. So he's living this duality of existence. And so really what I think ideal education follows this pattern, right? It starts with the common things. It starts with the individual souls of the young men, of the men in the caves and the shadows. And you work your way up, as the teacher did, kind of persuading, convincing that young man to come out, right? To leave the pitfalls of, violence and tyranny and the shadows, chasing the shadows of existence, money, fame, all those experiences that he sees maybe on the corner, and to lead those towards the idea, towards the higher possibilities, towards that higher realm of the spiritual aspects of himself. And so that's what the whole of education kind of is. And so with this sort of idea, I came up with this curriculum as part of the art project, which is the education of Eidos. And this basically is my attempt at creating an ideal education for that 12 or 13-year-old that has been arrested, that's gone through all that, and trying to find meaning within his life, trying to let his life see significance in a very real way. And then, like I said, it focuses on reading, writing, discussion, thinking, and creation. And the first thing to do is I'm going to have him do, and I'm going to be doing all these things with him, because this is the hardest task he'll do. And he will get paid for this, because I believe this is more worthy to pay than if he was just mopping at the end of a night of a shift at McDonald's. This is very hard work. Most men do not want to do this work. Harry will attest that people don't want to do this work. So we'll sit down and we'll write an autobiography so that he thinks about his past, who he was that led up to maybe that arrest, who he is now, and who he wants to be. And what that takes is writing is just thinking. If you can write about it, you're thinking about it, you're imagining, and you're working through things that stay in your mind, and you're allowing them to go outside yourself and make them concrete so you can see them as they are and move on or, grow up from those things. And so through that writing, he's able to contemplate his life, and he's able to set goals, for his future. And through writing, he can start conceptualizing that question: what is the good life, right? If the past is past, what's the future? What does that look like? And so a lot of this is constructed and thinking, what is that good life? So when we're reading great books, just because they're great doesn't mean the vocabulary is difficult. These are great because they appeal to a 70-year-old scholar, Harvard scholar. Every time they read it, they get something out of it. And every time a 12-year-old, 13-year-old from New Orleans reads something, they get something out of it. It's because these are great ideas. They're made somewhat simplistically, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Bible, even Plato's Cave. There are big concepts to wrestle with. And that's really what reading the great books is about. It's getting into this world where we're grappling with big ideas. Let's get away from the shadows of everyday life. The deadlines, the homework, the little hang-ups. Let's talk about those big things. What is the good? What is justice? What is the soul? What is peace? What is violence? What is love? What is bravery, right? Those are things that in the day-to-day education, youth do not get to think, and most adults don't get to think those big ideas about who they are as a man, as a human being. And so that's what the encounter with the great books is trying to accomplish. The third is dialogue about self-interest. We live in a democracy. We base everything off of dialogue. Through logos, that's dialogue. Through logos is account, reason. That's what the Greek is. And so through accountability, in a way, we find reasons. We find, the logic of life. And so for this, we're going to be going out in the community, and the question is, what do you love? Let's go do it today. Let's go meet someone who does something you love. Let's go do an activity if you love something you love. And then we're not just going to do the activity. We're going to contemplate afterwards. Okay, what did you like? What did you not like about that? What was good about that? Why did you like that? Give account of your passions. And that's something that the artist's life does very well. We always are talking about the things we love, right? Going on and on, maybe too much. But we do give an account of those things that we have passion for. And once we understand, the things that maybe are of that world of the shadows that he loves, we can start extracting and start bringing up that ladder of love. So we can start chasing those activities that are maybe a little more soul enriching. But it starts with doing just naturally what he loves. The fourth is thinking, self-knowledge. Quickly, this is about meditation. I remember when I was a kid, I remember all the times I had to go to timeout. I remember having to spend 15 minutes, and it felt like an eternity in silence. It felt like I literally was on keel over of boredom, of not having something in front of me. Even now I see it with the kids, it's even worse because they're so used to having a phone, like literally in front of their face. It's even harder to have that silence. But in meditation, you allow your mind to wander, and it starts kicking up all those things of the shadow world. And then eventually you start thinking of those bigger things because you're bored, and your soul starts getting invested in the imagination of your mind. And you start thinking about those larger ideas, and you start thinking about your mind is just looser and goes towards the future, it's malleable. So you can start thinking about maybe the things you were putting off thinking about when you just let your mind wander, in those daily lives. And then the last thing is creating their myth. And this is my favorite. This is the end product of these paintings are going to be a true collaboration. Some artists say that, they have collaborative work, right, with the community, but I want to make sure that is first and foremost within this project, is that this child is allowed to write their narrative about who they are and who they want to be. And I am, as the artist, a facilitator of that vision, of those thoughts, so that the end result is that he sees up there not a picture that was taken by a tourist, in a glimpse, that this is someone who has been with him for over a year, seen his growth, seen his struggle, heard his intimate thoughts, and put it back on the canvas as he saw it, right? In a better form, in a more colorful, philosophic form. And so what that means is that with each photo shoot, we're going to talk about the philosophy of each one. What's the message there? What do you want to say? How do you want to be perceived? What's the story? What do you want to wear? So he's going to be hands-on with me, going through that whole, design of, the props, the symbols. What are you wearing? Let's go buy it. Everything. What's your posture? And these are going to be a constant discussion before we get to the photo shoot, so that he is, like I said, very hands-on, and it's very, very much, a big part of, his life there. So the last part I want to talk about is bringing it all together. And what I really want to say is that I've seen all this stuff happening in our world. I've seen the artist as community leader, right? The artist as catalyst, the artist as sort of this creator of community. These are sort of the way we're talking about artists, street artists, that go in and use the power of activism in their art. And I wanted to always get deeper. What is that about? What is really going on with that? such that we don't have to use this language of social sciences to explain it. So what I came up with is sort of a definition of what this movement is, such that I hope that people who are using it, like Kehinde Wiley, like my friend B. Mike, who I see inklings of this stuff going through, can use it and expand so that we know what we're doing. So aesthetic idealism uses aesthetic experiences in the process of picture making in order to reveal the nature of the object or model previously obscured by public dogma. And what that means is basically like Kehinde Wiley, right? He uses the aesthetic experiences of those books, those history art books, in the process of his picture making, so that those aesthetic experiences reveal a nature that we would never see because our minds are obscured by public dogma, right? By, you want to say ideologies, you want to say mass media, mass culture. There's several stand-ins for that idea, but we perceive things, differently when we just go about unexamined. When we start examining those things, that's really when, this is where he's inviting us into this world of that second nature. And so the artist then is a catalyst for the second nature, right? That's what we're trying to spur on. We're trying to spur that, dig below the surface and reveal that nature that's maybe obscured by, the culture, the current culture around that young man, so that we can see his soul. That's really what it's about. And so just to bring it into a bigger context, what I'm seeing, this idea of aesthetic idealism, which is, the project that I'm talking about, I'm leading towards this, there's the idea of philosophy in art. And philosophizing was defined by Leo Strauss as the ascension out of the cave into the light of truth. It's literally that analogy of the cave is how he defines philosophy. And I always thought that was just such a great way of thinking about, a student thinking about what philosophy is. And it's very real. It's very easy to understand because it's one of those images you can't get out of your head. That's what philosophy is. It's this movement, right, from the things that are common, the shadows, to the world of the big ideas, the soul, And so aesthetic idealism documents philosophy. Aesthetic idealism starts with documenting the movements of the soul of that young man as he's dealing with his present, as he's dealing with the opinions he has that led him down towards, towards jail, towards, sort of a tyrannical, violent life. And he brings it. We're trying to understand those opinions and challenging them, such that we can bring him into a new light of understanding who he is. And that's really what it's all about. So, here's art and here's philosophy. In a way, we're bringing, the poetics under, philosophy. We're bringing art under philosophy now. So that the social impact of all of this is really, obviously this kid is going to be learning this education. It's going to be odd and interesting, and it's going to be a trial all throughout the year to challenge his character. So he's getting that, and he's also getting this education fund so that he can move towards that goal of becoming educated, becoming something beyond what he was in the beginning of this. But I think that I see the social impact of this project. But really what I see is that the role of the artist has changed, and that the artist is no longer the solitary visionary, that kind of lives outside the community, that needs to have distance, that sees everyone as other, as Sartre said. Sartre said, hell is other people, right? I think there's a sort of tinge to that, even when you look at, Seinfeld. There's a lot of that existential philosophy in our art, postmodern art. And so that idea of the solitary visionary outside of the community, I think has changed such that now the artist and community are in a dialogue, such that the artist has to have the community. He has to have that model. He has to have the input of that model. He has to understand the world from the eyes of the model. Because from there, from the level of the street, those movements of the soul that go towards those bigger ideas, those bigger abstractions, the artist now is documenting that and understanding everything in the context of that. He can't just start at abstraction. We can't just start at big ideas, abstract expressionism. We have to make our way there through the education of souls. And that's really what this is sort of all about, is using education as a way for the power of art to help art. And so that's really, when I think about that big question, maybe in the long run, I was thinking about this morning, when we think about the good life, maybe this is a better life for the artist. Maybe this is the good life for the artist as part of this project, and understanding his role within the community. And so I'm going to finish up here, and I'm going to talk very briefly about our budget, some brass tacks here. The biggest thing, I just want to highlight 3 things, and we'll move on. The biggest thing is paying this child. I always believe in that. Even when I was playing with the kids and they come out to their baseball game, I would pay them in baseball cards, because we shouldn't think that that's just expected. Maybe it was expected of you, but you were under different circumstances than these kids, where the temptation is very real at 9 years old to go and make, $1,000 on a Saturday night. Okay. I didn't have that temptation. My temptation was junk food, and that was about it. And so I want to pay these artists, I pay these models for doing this hard work. And so that's what you see here, the model fee. The supplies, these canvases are gigantic. I think 13 feet is about up there, right? So I'm trying to find now a studio that will accommodate me for that. So if anyone has any leads on that in New Orleans. But I want to make these canvases big. And that's what you can see, is the canvases are about $5,000 for 6 of them. And then the props, I want to make this like a small budget film. So in order for these props to be real and look like a king, they need to be made. As you saw in the one, I made this Book of Thrones, right? And I drew it first, and I tried to conceptualize the model within that Book of Thrones. It turned out horrible. We have the power of imagination, but I'm not Michelangelo, and we have photography. So let's use the tools that we have now. So I actually spent about 2 or 3 months gathering up all those books, painting the names that I wanted, of all the great books, making that throne. I have no construction experience. I am horrible with my hands, but somehow I pieced it together and made that Book of Thrones, and it turned out a lot better because I could see the concreteness of it. I could see the shadows. I could see how he sat in there. So I want to make all my props, and the model will be part of that. And so the last thing I'll say about is that I am not getting paid for this year. I'm doing it completely free. My payment, if anything, will come on the back end when we sell the paintings, but the priority is for the gallery to get paid and the college fund. And then if there's money left over, maybe I'll have enough for a vegan cheeseburger. But that's the idea, is really do those things. And so the last thing I'll talk about is donations. And this is also through the website charlesandersonart.com/epic. It will be on this video down at the bottom. And you can see sort of all these experiences. The idea is that art is an experience. And as a donor, the artists, you're allowing me, the artist, and the model to experience art. And so I want y'all to experience that. I want y'all to experience this beautiful, imaginative, playful, philosophic, poetic, colorful, embellished world that I'm inviting this young model into, that I'm a part of. So I came up with some experiences. These are all tax deductible through my nonprofit, the Artists of Frenchman Street. That should be up on the website as far as the name. If not, just email me. It's the Artist of Frenchman Street. That's who you can make out a check to. And these are all exchangeable. They're all, you can give them as gifts if you don't want to do them yourself. And there's no time limit. So briefly, I want to talk about, most of them we deal with painting. My favorite ones are Festival for 1200, right? A splatter paint party for your family, your friends. I have room in my studio for, let's say about 6 to 10 people. Then they can go and paint clothing. We can throw paint at each other. Everyone thinks that this is what I do on a daily basis. I have this like paint party. I have a model and I throw paint at. That's not what I do, but that's what I want to do with y'all. And so that would be really fun to do. There's also things like I can paint your driveway, which I did for my house, and it was great during the pandemic. A wall, a kid's wall, a mural. That's for 1,300. Artists level, 2 abstraction paintings of their favorite spots, and I did this actually for my sister, and they're hanging up in her house. There, every time I visit, I get to see sort of this abstract painting that I made of different areas. I don't know if any of her spots actually made it over there, but and then the experiencing with the model. Go to Saints games. That's 850. We're gonna go to Saints game together with the model. We'll go play laser tag. That's 450. Laser tag and arcade. Try to keep things fun. I want to do fun stuff. I don't want to be stuffy about this. And then the last thing I want to talk about is NFTs. NFTs are the future. There's just, for me, intuitively, there's no denying it. We already spend 75% of our time looking into this world, and everything in this world is important to us. We can't say that it's not. And so soon we'll go from here, looking at here, to looking at here in VR. We're not that far, and the youth aren't that far from looking at the world. So that's basically what NFTs are. They're art in this digital form. And so I had this vision. NFT, non-fungible tokens. And I can explain it to you. It's basically part of cryptocurrency, and it's sort of that whole genre. And so the idea that I want to have is that, I'm going to paint these paintings. Those will be the final products. Those will sell. The NFTs will be the digital copies of those paintings. And I will take them so that they're sort of like the Van Gogh experience, where there's different levels, sort of what you saw back here. This is sort of what I imagine in a very, well, you can even see it here. But, it's sort of this motion, these animating GIFs. And so I want to make the paintings as animating GIFs so that people can put it on VR and they experience this world, experience the world as I see it, in 3D. And that's sort of that first gift is you get a copy of the painting and you get an NFT. So that's the whole idea behind it. You can do multiple levels of gifts if you want multiple, gifts. And that's the end of my presentation. I very much appreciate everyone who's online. I think I retained, I know who's there. And thank you all for coming out. I very much appreciate, I wanted, I hate trying to ask money because I always feel like the money is going to make its way there. Like, I'll figure something out. But the most important thing for me is get the ideas, and having these ideas flesh out in front of friends and family. I can't believe how much I grew in this last week because I knew that folks were going to be there thinking and, talking to. It really upped everything. So, thank you everyone online. I very much appreciate it. And you can visit that website there at the bottom. And thank you so much. All right.